Quiet on set. Speed. And action.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart.
You know how to whistle, don't you? You just put your lips together and blow.
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
What's in the bar?
Houston, we have a problem.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh, that would shoot you crazy.
Welcome to the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Baylor. On today's episode, I have a very special guest. He is a veteran of the stage and screen, actor Frederick B. Owens. This guy's got a very extensive career we're going to talk about. He also happens to be a good friend of mine, so grab your popcorn and take your seats. It's time for your feature presentation. As mentioned, this is the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where our motto is, any film you haven't seen is a new experience. This is the second in our series of special guest interviews. My good friend, fascinating guy, and a very talented actor, Frederick B. Owens, is going to sit down and talk with us. I had a chance to chat with him, and I hope you guys enjoy. So, without further ado, please welcome Frederick Bruce Owens. Brother Fred, would you take a moment just to say hello to our audience?
Hello to the audience.
Yes, folks, sit down and relax. You're in for a treat. That's the voice you're going to be dealing with on this episode of our podcast. So I'm sitting here and I'm talking to a good friend of mine who I had the very good fortune to meet by chance, but let's dive into who this person is just a little bit. Frederick B. Owens.
Yes, sir.
Yes, veteran actor of stage and screen. He's appeared in over 300 plays with a career spanning multiple decades. He was a member of the original Broadway cast of Smokey Joe's Cafe. The soundtrack cast album won Fred a Grammy Award for his efforts. His Broadway credits include Man of La Mancha, Little Shop of Horrors, Dreamgirls, and Jesus Christ Superstar. He appeared in the 2005 film Hitch alongside Will Smith. He's appeared on Law & Order Special Victims Unit. Prolific career as a voice actor, done voiceover work for Chappelle's Show and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. An amazing singer and recording artist. He's worked with the likes of people such as Isaac Hayes, Gwen Guthrie, Gladys Knight, many, many others. Currently works as a mentor youth basketball coach in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Please, listeners, welcome my good friend, Frederick B. Owens. So, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good considering, taking it one day at a time like everybody else, just trying to stay safe, play by the rules, and try not to go nuts.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Doing the podcast is definitely part of that therapy to avoid the insanity.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your story. Tell us where you're from and how you caught the acting bug.
Well, I'm originally from Henderson, North Carolina. In 1979, I moved to Newark, New Jersey, to pursue a career in nursing. I went to school for nursing, so it was my desire to pursue a nursing career. And during Christmas of 1980, I was on the subway during the Christmas season going to Macy's to do some Christmas shopping. And I stepped on a man's foot and I said, "Excuse me," and he liked my voice and put me in a show, and the rest, as they say, is history. The man, by the way, was Melvin Van Peebles.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I got into this madness that we call the entertainment industry. It wasn't something that I, grew up aspiring to be. I was a big fan of TV and film when I was growing up, especially with Westerns, because that was a big deal when I was coming up. So I knew all the Westerns, but I never watched anything with the hopes of one day I'd be on the big screen. It just happened.
John Foote, who is our namesake here and who does most of the shows with me, is also a really big fan of Westerns. What are some of your favorites? What are the ones you grew up watching?
Who, me? I still watch Rifleman. I just finished watching an episode. I watched The Big Valley, Rifleman, Roy Rogers, Hopalong Cassidy. They don't have to be during my era. I just remember them growing up because my grandfather was a huge fan of Westerns. So I watched them, and for whatever reason, now that I have this thing that I can just go on YouTube and pull stuff up, I do it all the time. I've done it a lot since this quarantine.
I can
I
imagine, yeah. Yeah, people have been going down a lot of streaming rabbit holes in YouTube, endless binging. Western's sort of it's a unique genre of film. I mean, uniquely and specifically American. And the period now that we've been making Western films has lasted longer than the Old West was the
Mhm.
real thing. Now, two quintessentially American genres of film, at least the birth of them, were the Western and the musical. You are an incredibly musical guy. People are hearing you speak. And I want to know, did you have were you always singing? Was that something that was just part of your life, or is it something you aspired to later?
Yes. Well, my mother gave up her career as a singer to raise a family. So music was always playing in the house, and she was always singing. And it was, I don't know what it was about that whole thing of music, but no matter where I was in my life or what was going on at the time, you have to understand I was raised during the segregated South. So this was a period where, like we had a public swimming pool downtown, but we weren't allowed to go to it. So it was music and TV that took me away from all of that stuff, that basically showed me that there is a world outside of where I was. And that was my whole thing of, when I get out of high school, I have to get out of here because I want to go see that world that I've seen on TV, because I
Yeah.
know it exists and I know I can be a part of it. I just couldn't be a part of it where I was. So yes, my mother's a singer. All of my sisters are singers. My father, when I would go visit him in New York, he always had guys around him that were in the industry, like Bo Diddley.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, he was an old friend of my father, so I used to see him all the time. So
Man,
I was always around
you've been in some rooms with people who I would die to share the air with,
it.
Um,
So,
I kind of came into my musicianship early on, really, really influenced by blues music and Southern American music, and a lot of music that comes from Black culture and stuff. And,
uh-huh.
and like when I sing or when I try to do anything rock and roll, it's always trying to tap into that. It's a world I've never known personally, but I've never understood, you know, any kind of bigoted person who listens to rock and roll music. It's like, if you've got a problem with a person's skin color, just take all the greatest music that you've ever listened to and throw in the garbage bin, man, because that's
Well,
where it comes from.
also you have to understand, where I was raised, we only had one radio station. So I was raised on country western.
Yeah, yeah.
And it kind of blows people away when they hear me talk about country western music or the artists that I know, the songs that I know, really. Again, we wake up every morning, there was this guy named Homer Brow Harper.
Hmm.
he was the guy that we woke up to every single morning, Monday through Friday, and he was pumping them all. Uh, I mean, all up and down the line. I mean, Dolly Parton, Porter Wagner, you go up and down. I know them all.
Yeah.
Yes,
Johnny
indeed.
Cash, Waylon
Oh, yes.
Jennings.
Yes, and yes, indeed. So as much as people think that because I am a man of color, that I would be totally about rhythm and blues or soul, I was actually raised on country western. I'm probably know more of that than I do the rooted music of rhythm and blues and gospel those kinds of things.
Right. Well, they all sort of got together at one point and gave birth to, music. It's been an evolution, not a revolution, right?
Absolutely.
My mom, your lunch buddy, Angela, who you met, she loves this concert celebration of country music that she often puts on at night, maybe after a couple of glasses of wine, and it's really a celebration of that old country music. And there's something poignant that someone said, I can't remember who said it, but country music is 3 chords and the truth.
There you go.
Yeah. And
country music to me and blues is all one and the same. Basically, the way I see it is usually a bunch of guys sitting around whining and complaining about their women leaving them and all this kind of stuff. It's all one and the same to me.
Yeah, I feel you. Absolutely. I remember some of I saw the movie Ray, about the life of Ray Charles, starring Jamie Foxx, when it came out, and I had known about Ray Charles, but I became a
huge country western fan.
Yeah, I became an obsessive fan of his music after seeing that movie, and it's one of the things I love about musical biopics is that it exposes people to music and genres that they might not necessarily have come to otherwise. But the way he sang some of those country songs is just marvelous.
And he was true to him.
Yeah. About the stories, about storytelling, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So was your voice always, I mean, your voice wasn't this deep when you were a kid, when you were a small child, obviously. Did it happen overnight, or where did that liquid chocolate come from,
Well, it really did, because I started out as a tenor. And I remember, because I was, we were, of course, everybody in the South is raised in the church. So I was one of those lead singers that was always doing tenor. And just so happened, going into grade 8, we came down for breakfast one morning, and my mother said, "Man, listen to your voice." I didn't even notice the change. So
everyone else noticed first.
Yeah, well, it just went from tenor to bass. There was no in between. And so that is what caused my initial bout of dealing with depression, which is crazy, because that's where it came from, because the tenors got all the attention, got all the girls, and then overnight I went from tenor to bass, and all of a sudden wasn't nobody talking about me no more, other than, listen to that old man's voice on that little kid. I heard that a lot, and that depressed me even more, because I saw it as something negative. I didn't see nothing positive about having a deep voice at that time, because no one said anything to me that was positive about it, other than, good Lord, man, listen to that old man's voice. That's what I heard at age 13 and 14. Now, bring my mother into the picture. She did a very neat thing. She came home one day, and she always plays music when she's cleaning up, and she dropped a Barry White album.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first time I heard something that I could relate to. And that's why I'm a big Barry White fan to this day.
Yeah.
So that was what brought me up out of that whole thing, was Barry White, because there were women who were going crazy about his voice too.
Man, and I've seen you do the songs. For our listeners, this man here has done Barry White tribute concerts, and I've seen them, and man, it's something to behold. It's so strange to me that people weren't super interested in you with that low voice, because I sit around with some of my musician buddies, and I'll go to YouTube videos, and it's like bass singers from various a cappella groups, and they've cut and edited it together and seeing who can hit the lowest note. And man, to me, the bass voice is such I put it on a pedestal. It's such an awesome and powerful thing to have, to be able to get
people ask me what is my lowest note. My lowest note is the first G on the keyboard.
Yeah. And
coming from the left side.
yeah. To quote a friend of mine, I can't even think that low.
Well, I say the same to you. I can't even think that high.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So Broadway.
Mhm.
When did that come into the fold? Like, when did you know you wanted to do it? What got you there, and what
I
made you stay there?
okay. That's again, and for those who know the book that I've been writing, it's all of these stories, and this I have an amazing journey, Nick. This is how I got to Broadway. I never aspired, just like everything else. I never aspired to be on Broadway. Never saw myself singing one Broadway song. There was a music review that they used to do at the old Motown Cafe on 42nd Street, and they used to do a Temptations review, where a very dear friend of mine, Lee Summers, was singing. He was doing the track for Melvin Franklin for the Temptations, and I used to go see the show all the time, so I knew it backwards and forward. There was no choreography. I knew all the music because I was raised with Motown. So anyway, he had a death in the family, and because it was a non-union show, they didn't have an understudy for him, and he asked me if I would do his track for him that weekend. So it was just 3 shows a day for 45 minutes on that Saturday, or on that Friday and that Saturday. So on that Saturday night, in the audience was Otis Salid, who was the original director for Smokey Joe's Cafe. He thought I was Lee Summers. So when he offered me the role of this workshop that they were doing, that they were going to take it to Broadway, he thought he was offering the role to Lee Summers. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so because he kept calling me Lee. You know, it was like, I don't know anybody can hit notes like that. You are basically a half an octave lower than Melvin Franklin, or what I remember. And somebody had told me that you were a bass, but they basically said you were more like a Lou Rawls or an Isaac Hayes. I didn't know you were an authentic bass. And I'm looking at him and I'm going, why does he keep calling me Lee? Don't even know who I am. Because I was stupid enough to think that everybody knew who I was. Yeah, so that was how I got into the workshop of Smokey Joe's Cafe. But at that time, it was called D.W. Washburn's All-Star Singing Music Black and White Review. That's what it was called when Otis. And so we opened in Chicago June 2nd, 1994, and we closed on June 4th, 1994. We didn't stay open 2 days. The show was that bad.
Wow.
It was really bad because they tried to put a script to it, which Lieber and Stoller said from day one they didn't want a script. They didn't want a script, but Otis was the director and he was hell bent on this script. And so once the show closed, they still felt like their music could carry the show. So they brought in this lady, Susan Schulman, who is a Broadway doctor who came in and took away the music. And then she was the one who put it in the music review format. And then by the time we got to LA, Jerry Zaks became the director, and he was there to take us to Broadway. So that's how that whole thing happened.
Now, did you come to love it? The audience? I mean, to me, it's the most intoxicating thing in the world, live performance. Did it hook you right away?
Well, I was always hooked to the live performances. I didn't need to go to Broadway to get that kind of a high. As a matter of fact, I was doing a show called Doo Wop Love at that time, which was basically the same thing. We were doing songs of the 50s, the doo-wop stuff of the 50s. So I was already doing a show that was doing exactly what Smokey Joe's was doing. I quit the show like 4 times. Most people don't know that, but I'm not a dancer. I wasn't a dancer or even a mover at that time, so every time, we did choreography, I felt like I was holding everybody back. So I just up and left the show. And it was Lever and Stoller who told the choreographer, I don't care what you got to do to get this man to move. We can't find nobody else to sing these low notes.
So I think you've mentioned this story. There was a unique solution to that problem, right?
Yes.
So what was that?
Relating to it in terms of basketball.
Right.
Part of it, part of it. And the other half of it, there were extraordinary people in that show who really wanted to see me do well. And so when we would have breaks during rehearsals. They would take their time to work with me and modify things so I could learn it. But it was basically, Joey saying, if you know how to play defense, I can teach you how to move. And he did. It was the strangest thing, but it opened up a whole world for me because as a basketball coach, now I understood how to teach players a little bit better in terms of defensive movement. And so it worked out for everybody.
You say you growing up, you were a big television and film fan. Who are some of your favorite actors? Who are some of the people that influenced you?
Yul Brynner for obvious reasons, because the first big film that I ever saw was the yearly thing that we watched every year, which was the Ten Commandments, and I think he played the character of Ramses. Charlton Heston, I could go. Now, if you're asking me what I was raised with in terms of who my favorite artists are, we're
Even
talking
today,
about,
even today, who do you like?
Robert Duvall is my all-time favorite actor, hands down. Nobody's even close. He's my guy.
You shockingly share a lot of similarities with John, our namesake here at the site, because it was the Ten Commandments that got him fascinated with film, and he is a massive Robert Duvall fan. So you guys have similar tastes.
But my favorite movie of all time is Wuthering Heights with Laurence Olivier, the original one.
Right.
Yeah, David Niven. That's my all-time favorite movie.
Right. You sent me a list of some of your favorites. I'm just going to pull it up right now. Now, a lot of these are not very shocking. I mean, The Godfather.
Yep.
Scarface. I'm presuming you mean the 1983 Scarface with Al Pacino?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah, this was a subject that just came up on social media, right? Because they're going to remake Scarface, which should surprise absolutely no one. And Scarface itself
actually it surprised me.
Really?
Yeah, it did. Because there are just some things I don't think people should mess with. That's just me.
Fair enough. I mean, fair enough. However, the Al Pacino Scarface movie itself is a remake of an earlier film.
Yes, I know, but this was the one. That was the one. And I just, although, Michael B. Jordan, and I know a lot of people who don't like the fact that he's going to play the role, but, I tell them, man, we are artists. We are artists, and we should be able to be given the opportunity to showcase our talent and our ability to do anything.
Look, you know what?
Gotta give them a chance.
Here's what people don't get is, like, if they're going to do a modern remake of Scarface, here are the bullet points that the story is going to have. The lead character may or may not be an immigrant to America from somewhere. He's going to be involved in some kind of illegal trafficking of some kind, and he's going to go from rags to riches. That's it. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why Michael B. Jordan wouldn't be a great choice. I think he's a great actor. I think he's one of the best young actors out there working. I mean, Creed absolutely blew me away.
Yeah, that's my movie.
Yeah, man. And I was never even really big into the Rocky franchise. But I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking it. But when I saw Creed, it was tugging my heartstrings in all the right directions. I think Stallone should have won an Oscar for that movie for supporting actor.
I agree. I totally agree.
And then
I feel bad because on my top 10, I only had one Rocky movie on. I think it's Rocky 3 was my favorite. But I could have put them all in there.
Yeah, I know you're a big Rocky fan. My last guest on this show is my buddy, gentleman Josh Hill, who is a mixed martial arts fighter and a big movie buff, and he loves Rocky. He proposed to his wife at the steps, the famous steps.
In Philadelphia.
In Philly, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so Rocky 3 is your favorite.
Yes, with Mr. T.
Yes, Clubber Lang.
Clubber Lang.
So
my taste in film there. You know, most people have, when you talk about their favorite films, it's usually either something or the other. Like my son, my oldest son, his favorites are anything sci-fi he loves.
right.
I'm all over the place. I don't care what it is. If it's good, I can appreciate it. If the acting is of quality, I can appreciate it. So that's why when you saw the list, you must have been like, good Lord, this list is all over the place.
I love that though. It's like taste in music. I mean, people know me on the site here. Like I'm one of a few of the writers. I'm the geek, the resident geek. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I'm not even the biggest geek in the world. Some geeks would call me a fake, but I'm the guy who loves your comic book movies, your superhero movies, your science fiction, all
Yes,
that stuff.
I know that about you. Yes, indeed.
Yes, I know you do. But it's not like I'm limited to that genre, and I don't think anybody should be. And I agree with what you're saying. And all any movie has to do is deliver on its promise.
Hmm.
So, like,
Absolutely.
I'm looking at your list here, and there's some great movies on here. You got E.T. I mean,
Yes,
does it
yes.
bring you to tears too?
It did at that time.
Yeah,
I'm much older now, so I'm able to handle things a little bit better.
yeah, for sure.
So there are some things that I cried watching once upon a time. I watch it now. It's like, okay, you know, I was just a big sap.
I am a big sap when it, like, if a movie will get me there, I will just
uh,
let loose.
oh, I'm like that watching things like what is it called? America's Got Talent, those kind of things when people
Yeah,
have those, you know, emotional stories and then they get up to sing and people get emotional and the judges start crying. I cry right along with them.
yeah, man, totally. You
Yeah.
know what? There's a movie that I'm sitting here recording this, and my little dog Teddy, who's a Jack Russell Terrier, he's kind of hovering around, and he follows me around, and he's behaving right now. But there's this movie called My Dog Skip with Frankie Muniz and Kevin Bacon and Luke Wilson and Diane Lane. And it's about a kid during the 1940s who gets a pet dog. And it's all about the relationship with him and his dog. And by the end of the movie, he's going off to college and the dog is old. And Harry Connick Jr. narrates it. And every time I watch it, by the end of that movie, it's just like a knife in the heart. I just turn into a blubbering mess. But that's
Uh-huh.
part of the reason we watch movies, right? I mean, we
Yep,
want to be
absolutely.
transported. So I'm looking at your list here. You got Predator on there. That's pretty boss.
Yeah. Well, one of my best friends, Kevin Peter Hall, played the Predator. So yeah.
Right on. You got
Yeah.
a lot of interesting friends. Another
Yeah.
movie
Yes, I do.
that gets me gets the tears going for me is Forrest Gump, and your good friend is that in that as well, right?
Yeah, Michael T. Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
plays
Bubba.
Bubba.
Yes, he does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
So, you know, it's funny that you would say that because a lot of times some of the films that I really do love, it's because I know somebody in it and I'm just appreciative of their work because a lot of times I know their stories and know where they came from and how far it took for them to get to where they were. So just to see them, you know, playing that role, people really didn't get a chance to experience Kevin Peter Hall, who played the Predator. He was one of the most gifted and talented Black actors I'd ever been around in my life. Unfortunately for him, he was 7 feet tall, so it was difficult for him to get work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what?
So for that, you know, the other role that he played other than the Predator, he was in Harry and the Hendersons.
No shit.
He was the thing. Whatever
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is.
I assume so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Kevin. Yeah.
Right on. It's got to be tough for people of big stature to, really get work that isn't sort of focused directly on that stature. I'm watching a documentary series right now about The Undertaker, the wrestler.
Yes. Huge wrestling fan I am.
Yeah, this is part of the reason I brought it up. So Mark Calloway is the guy who's been the Undertaker for, I guess,
Yes.
almost 30 years in the WWE, and he's so associated with that character. And for most of his history, he kind of never really did anything out of character. But now he's got a film crew that's been following him around for a couple of years.
Oh wow! Is this on? What is this? Is this
It's on the
Netflix?
WWE network, but
Oh, okay.
you might search around online. You might be able to find it, but it's called Undertaker: The Last Ride.
Okay.
And it's absolutely fascinating. And I talked a little bit about wrestling with my buddy Josh, just because he's a fighter and everything. It really is theater,
Yes,
on
it
a
is.
massive scale.
Yes, indeed, it is.
So you're a big fan.
And have been since like age 4 or 5. Everything for me was always my grandfather. My
Yeah.
grandfather always watched wrestling. He watched baseball. So I'm a huge Yankee fan because of my grandfather. Everything that he watched on the TV, that's what I watched, and that's what I became a fan of. So he was a huge fan of those Westerns, and that's why I'm a big fan of Westerns and wrestling to this day, and basketball, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about basketball. You now live in my hometown in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
Yes, indeed.
I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm also going to let you know that you can feel free to be as crude and as vulgar as you want on my podcast. What brought you to Hamilton?
A woman.
I was hoping you were going to say something else, but okay.
Well, it's true. I was dating a young lady, and I came up to visit her for a week, and she just ended up staying up here. Her son was playing at St. Mary's Catholic school, and I went to a couple of games, and I saw some things that I'm like, in the States, we do it different than that way, and I wonder if they understand that. So I talked to the coach after the game, and he said, we need coaches up here to teach the game. We really have more volunteer parents, but they really don't know the game of basketball. So I left that following day and went back home. And then I said, something, this would be perfect for me right now, because I needed a challenge in my life, because I was just straight up bored with doing film and TV. Most
Now,
people.
wasn't the lady's name Wilma?
Yes, Fred and Wilma.
Fred and Wilma, right?
Um,
You have a story about Fred Flintstone, don't you?
I have a story about everybody, but I don't always remember them.
Didn't you play Fred Flintstone in?
I did for Disney 1 year.
So you wore like the big suit?
Yeah, they had a thing for it was Six Flags did this collaboration thing with Disney, and they had all of the characters they're representing, and I was the head, just the head. That's all you really saw. There was no costume. It was just the big head, Flintstone head. That was me.
Just another bitch and cool feather in your cap, eh, Fred?
Well, it's funny because I actually left a Broadway show to do that.
I remember you saying this, and the reason was just because it's something you said you wanted to do, right?
Because I wanted to do it. The people on Broadway was like, "You're actually leaving Broadway to go to Six Flags and be in a hot suit for this something?" I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I've always been one of those people. If it's on my bucket list, it doesn't matter to me where I am at that time. If it presents itself, I'm jumping all on.
That's awesome, man.
I'm totally gonna jump on it. So I didn't lose my status with the show. All I did was took a leave of absence for 2.5 months, and I came back in September and never missed a beat. So, and it was funny because a lot of the cast members would come to Six Flags during the summer and bring their kids, and I would see them.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about film and TV. I mean, you talked about your journey to Broadway. How did you make it onto film and TV? How did that journey unfold?
Just as weird as everything else. I did a commercial back in 1981 as an extra, and I didn't even really know what an extra was. I didn't even really know anything about the film industry at that time. And a friend of mine said they needed some extras for this Miller commercial that John Travolta's brother, was doing. And they needed some people to be in the stands. And it was only like 200 of us, but they made it seem like the whole place was filled with all of these people. So that was my first time doing it. And the casting director remembered me. And there was a film that was coming out called Black and White. It was an international film, actually. And they needed somebody to play a preacher. And she called me out of nowhere and asked me if I would be interested in playing a preacher, which I laughed at because I was raised around preachers. No one had ever asked me to play the role of a preacher before, which I thought was interesting because if people knew me, they would know, I was raised around that. So you can ask, I can do that in my sleep. And so that was how I got in the film business. I didn't think that, honestly, that it would last long. I knew that I would be doing commercials. That's really what I wanted to do, was the commercial thing. Because commercials were quick. You get paid and then you go home. Films took forever. So that's how I got in it. My first good break came when MTV called me. They were doing this promotional thing for hip hop week called Keep It Real. And they had me do this character called Ajax. I think I've posted a video or two of him.
Oh, I've seen it. I've seen it.
Well, anyway, out of that actually came my screen test for the 2000 film Shaft that Samuel Jackson eventually did, but I was the first choice to do.
I remember you telling me this, and it just absolutely blew my mind. So I could see you absolutely crushing that role. So,
well, if I didn't learn nothing, I learned that you don't count your eggs before they hatch. My agent had me hyped up that I was going to get the role. The casting director had me amped up that I was the first choice. They flew me to LA. I did a screen test like 3 times, but for whatever reason, nobody was offering me a contract. They just kept saying, this person needs to see you. Then the producer wanted to see me. Then this guy wanted to see me. And before I know it, my agent called and said, "You're not going to believe this." And I'm like, "What?" I thought was going to tell me they had canceled the film altogether, because to do a remake of anything is a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing to do.
right.
She said, "Sam Jackson has agreed to play the role of Shaft." And I was crushed.
I'm crushed just hearing
I don't even know if crushed is really the right word, man. I was devastated. And I was even more devastated when we talked, Sam and he said that he turned it down like 7 times, but they just kept bothering him and kept bothering. He said, "Had I known it was you, I would have never taken the role."
Oh, man.
Yep. But he didn't know, and I didn't bother to call him because all I heard was they want Sam Jackson. So once Hollywood makes up their mind if they want an A-list actor, that's all there is to it. And you really can't fight against it, because at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. It's about making money. Sam Jackson will sell a lot more tickets than Fred Owens will sell, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
So I understand how the whole thing works, but it's still made me angry. Just like when
I want to see the version of Shaft with you in it.
It's the same. It's same thing basically happened with Coach Carter. Basically, the same thing happened. But that was a role that I know he wanted. I knew he wanted that role.
Right.
But they couldn't reach a contract agreement, so they basically had me standing in the wings just in case everything fell through.
Did you have your expectations managed a little better that time around?
What was the question again?
Sorry, when Coach Carter happened, were you sort of better prepared for the letdown, or did you get your hopes up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It wasn't as big of a deal as Shaft, because with Shaft they basically had me thinking I had the role. There was no, they told me right off the bat, Sam has been offered the role. If you don't take it, then you're going to be next in line. So I know Sam well enough to know Sam don't turn down nothing but his collar. He'll play anything.
Right. We're going to do, I was talking to John, it's like, we got to do a podcast on Samuel L. Jackson. It's going to be 57 hours long. Because we just go through the filmography of everyone we talk about.
Yep, that's a fact.
So you were already familiar, you and Sam Jackson at that point when the Shaft thing happened?
Oh, Sam and I've been friends for years. Sam, Denzel, myself, Adolph Caesar, quite a few of us came up through the ranks in the Negro Ensemble Company in New York.
Oh yeah.
Um, Almost every A-list black actor or B-list black actor that came from out of New York, they either came from the Negro Ensemble Company or Woody King Federal Theater downtown, or they came from the National Black Theater Company up in Harlem. But you came from one of those three. I just happened to be working at all three at that time. I did basically my apprenticeship at the Theater of Universal Images in Newark for 5 years. And so that's where the majority of the plays came from, because they would do a production every 3 months. So while you were doing a production, you were in rehearsal for another one. That's the way it worked. Um, the small community theater. And that's the reason why community theater will always be dear to me, because that's where I made my bones. So yeah, I knew Sam, Denzel, Adolph Caesar, James Earl Jones, all of them, Robert Hooks. We all came through the ranks together. Some just, progressed and wanted, the celebrity part of it a lot more than others did. Um, I never really wanted that. And maybe that's the reason why it was so easy for me to walk away from it. Which is another one of those things that, people often ask me, how did you just walk away from the business? Well, I didn't really walk away from it. I just focused on one thing. I do voiceovers now, and that's it.
You still doing that regularly?
Absolutely. I do promos for Playboy TV quite a bit.
That's awesome. And it makes perfect fucking sense.
Yeah. So, and also for the Raptors. I do a lot of voice work for them now also. Raptors, the Maple Leafs, anybody that's with MLSE.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I'm not, I mean, I was very happy for the Toronto Raptors winning the championship. Although I'm not a basketball fan. I'm not much of a sports fan, but I am a diehard Leaf fan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. Let's talk about some voiceover stuff, because there's something I want to mention. I mentioned it in the intro. As a kid, I was obsessed with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in fact, my mother tells a story that I had a little toy keyboard, little red one, probably only about the length of a ruler. And one day she came in and she heard me just kind of plucking out the theme to the Ninja Turtles and singing along with it. She's like, how did you do that? And I said, I just listened. And then they got me into piano lessons. So the start of my musical journey is sort of centered around the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Wow.
Talk about the work you've done with them. Don't you voice like one of the villains?
Well, I do two voices. I do Traximus and Leatherhead, which is the crocodile. And
Right.
Traximus, I think he's a big rhino or something. And again, it's one of those things during the early part of 2000, a director came to see the show that I was doing at that time, which was Jesus Christ Superstar. And he wanted me to come and do some work for what he called the Fox Box. Does that ring a bell?
No, explain it.
Okay, so all of the cartoons were on Fox on Saturday morning.
No, I think I know what you mean now. Yeah,
and they called it the Fox Box. So there was this cartoon called Funky Cops, and they wanted me to come in and do the voice for the captain. And one of the directors from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles just happened to be in the booth that day, and he heard my voice and he asked me if I would be willing to come and read for him for this character that they call Leatherhead. And I said, well, sure. I mean, my sons were huge fans of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so I know if nothing else, it would be a big deal to my sons. So out of that came Traximus, and then I started doing One Piece, G.I. Joe, Ugio. If it was on Fox on Saturday mornings, I had my hand in it somewhere.
You never did anything for Spider-Man, the animated series, did you?
I don't know. That's just the whole thing about it. No, really. I mean, if it was on Fox on Saturday mornings, I was doing so many voices at that time. And something, it's funny how we could pull from our childhood. I was a huge fan of cartoons on Saturday mornings. I never tried to imitate any of them, but I knew exactly how all of that stuff went. So when it was time for me to do it, it was like the most natural thing in the world for me. Somebody just say, if I can see the character and see what he looks like, I can pretty much give you something. You can decide from there if you want me to go in another direction, but it's just based on looking at this guy. This to me is what he probably sounds like. And a lot of times it was pretty much on the money with the directors. They loved it. They were like, exactly, that's exactly what we're looking for. Man. So yeah, if you look at my credits, it does say G.I. Joe.
I was looking at your IMDb page, yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure Spider-Man was in there because that was one of those things that was on the Fox box. I just don't remember all of them because the one thing that I was doing was Funky Cops. I was a regular on there, so I was doing that every single week. All the rest of them, I was doing spot things.
Right.
So, like with Mutant Ninja Turtles, they didn't always need me, but they always had their regulars that they had all the time.
Right.
Same thing with G.I. Joe, same thing with One Piece. Although with One Piece, I did the introduction because I played the character of Gold Roger, who I don't know if you're familiar with that cartoon or not.
No, but it's still wicked fucking cool.
I'll send you all of that stuff, but as much as I can find, as much as I can send you, so you can have some idea.
Yeah, man, for sure.
But everybody was chasing Gold Roger. Everybody was chasing him, and the only time you really heard him was at the top of the intro for One Piece.
I see.
Yeah. So Funky Cops and One Piece, that was pretty much what I was called in to do. All of that other stuff just started happening, and they would just call me when they needed me. I mean, first time they called me in for Ugio, I thought it was like, why are y'all asking me to do a Japanese cartoon? That's what I thought it was. They were going to be asking me to do some kind of accent, which I'm horrible with accents, by the way. I can't do them at all. Yeah. So that's how all of that stuff happened. So I have a list of, when agents say, let me see your resume, I will show them things and they'll go, good Lord, you did all of that. It's not really all of that. I did this one day and I probably didn't see them for another 3 or 4 months. And then they'll call me. So I did a lot of things at different times.
You recorded voiceover for Chappelle's show, which I'm a big fan of. Roots, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically the premise was they were releasing a
25th anniversary,
comprehensive anniversary edition of Roots with behind the scenes footage and stuff. And of course, Chappelle put in like his hilarious spin on it for what happened behind the scenes and outtakes and everything. It's very, very funny. Did you meet Dave Chappelle? Do you know Dave?
All the time. Yeah. It's so funny because a lot of times he didn't even need to be there, but he wanted to be there to give his input. So a lot of times with the voice stuff that I did for them, I never expected to see him, but he was always there and he was always smoking his weed.
Nice.
And I would always help him.
There you
go. But he always kept one of the funniest people in the world, man. I'm telling you.
He is. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, you have to understand, there were times when we would do that whole thing when keeping it real goes wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we would do that, he would just say things that I would laugh so hard about that the director literally had to stop him from being in the booth while I was in there.
You just couldn't contain yourself with the laughter, eh?
Well, he knew he had me. You know, it's just like you. I think of you as one of the funniest people that I know.
Oh,
And I don't like giving away my secrets because I may have to work with people again. But both you and Andrew would say things sometimes when I was in the change room with you guys that if I had let you guys know how funny it really was to me, y'all would get me on stage. That was always my greatest fear.
I really appreciate that. I
That
do.
that
Yeah.
that people know they can get you with stuff, then they'll try to do it on stage. And I'm weak with that. I can't, brother, I can't fight it.
Well, it's always good to laugh.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I heard it. I think I heard it explained best by George Carlin when he talked about wanting to impress adults and stand in front of the room, and the first inclinations of wanting to become an entertainer when you're a kid is like you basically just want people to look at you and kind of smile and go, "80 cute and clever."
There you
And
go.
that's the psychological need that I think a lot of performers are always trying to fulfill.
One of the few people in the industry that I didn't get a chance to meet that I wish I would have was George Carlin.
He is probably my biggest hero in life, which surprises a lot of people that it's not.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, yeah, a lot of people would think it would be someone who was more of an established actor or a musician or something, but I don't really hold anyone in higher regard than I did George Carlin. And for me, he was Mr. Conductor because he used
Hmm.
to narrate the Thomas the Tank Engine show, which I watched as a little kid, and he played Mr. Conductor on the American spin-off Shining Time Station. And I remember when we got, I guess I must have been 13-ish around there. We got pay-per-view and like HBO and stuff at my house. And I was
Uh-huh.
surfing through the channels, and I was like, "Oh, look, there's Mr. Conductor. Oh, he's just
Hmm.
dressed in a black shirt and black pants." And I spent the next 30 minutes dying of laughter. Couldn't believe the vulgar language I was hearing. Um, my dad then went out and he bought me two of his books, and I've read everything he ever wrote, and I've seen everything he ever said. And
Hmm.
I've always said it would be a dream role for me to be able to play George Carlin in a movie. So maybe one day the stars will align.
Well,
Um,
you definitely have the ability to do it. And I know you know this because I tell you, and I've told you this more than once, you're one of the most gifted young men I've ever met in my life, ever. And I don't say that to flatter you. It's nothing but the truth. And I've been telling you this for the longest time. I don't know too many people who are as gifted to do the number of things that I've seen you do.
Shucks, you're making me blush, Fred.
Well, you have to know that this is not the first time you've heard me say this.
Oh, I know.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate it, man. And of
And
course,
and
I
I
love
and
you.
I'm
I
and
love you
I
like a brother. And getting to work with you and do stuff on stage with you is just an absolute joy and an absolute treat. And I want to talk about something that I always really enjoy, and that's when you unexpectedly show up in my house. And you do it sometimes when I'm watching TV, because sometimes I'm watching Law and Order Special Victims Unit,
Mhm.
and I look at the TV and I was like, "Hey, there's my boy Fred." Um, so you were on that show. Talk about how that happened.
That was fate. I remember the day when I went in for the audition and I saw that the character's name was John Henderson,
Yeah.
and I'm from Henderson, North Carolina. I basically walked in the room and told them, y'all have to give me this role just based on this name alone. It is my fate that I should have this role. And they gave it to me. And I was like, shit, I should have been doing this all along.
You've discovered a golden ticket.
Yeah, but that's how I got that role. And it was a really big deal for my family because that was the first time that they saw me on something major on national TV. So it was a really, really big deal uh, because that was the first. Well, actually, Ed TV was the first big thing that I did in terms of the episodics and the things that come on in the evening. Now, I think at one time it was called Stuckyville or something. they had multiple names for the show. I don't know if you remember it, but it was
No,
called
I'm
Ed.
not familiar with it.
Okay, it was called Ed, and then it was called Stuckyville, or it was called Stuckyville, and then they changed the name to Ed. And I don't quite remember the guy who was the headliner for the show, but I had also done the education of Max Bickford with Richard Dreyfuss, and I was playing the assistant to Marsha Mason, and I had done like 2 episodes, and then they decided they were going to hire me full time, which would have been probably the greatest thing to happen in my career, to have to sit between Richard Dreyfuss and Marsha Mason every week. And the very next day, they canceled the show.
Geez.
Yep, I was torn, to say the least. But I was in a show at that time. I was doing Man of La Mancha, so it wasn't like I wasn't working. And that, looking back at it, when I was in grade 6, that was the first year that we had a white teacher at our school, because I was raised in an all-black school. That was the first year that we had a white teacher at the school, and she took us to see a touring company of Man of La Mancha. So I thought it was very ironic that I ended up doing it on Broadway. And the only sad part about that is that she was not alive at that time. I would have loved to have had her come to New York and to see me in that show after having introduced me to the show in the first place. So although I, tell people I never had no desires to do Broadway, maybe that thing was planted in me a long time ago and I just didn't know it.
Yeah, maybe. Oh,
Yeah.
now, like, you've done a lot of musicals and a lot of shows. Do you have any particular favorites? Any that mean a lot to you more than others?
Little Shop is my all-time favorite for obvious reasons. Well, Smokey Joe's because it was my first Broadway show. Then Little Shop of Horrors. The Full Monty was really, really big deal for me because all of my best friends had done it on Broadway, from C.E. Smith, God, I can't even think of his name right, Andre DeShields, Ronald White. All of my best friends had done it on Broadway. So I wasn't in the club. And so for me to do it at HTI and play the role of Horse, they got me in the club with the other brothers.
That is so cool. For our
So-
listeners, HTI is Hamilton Theatre Inc. It's this very small community theater in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Fred has done shows there, and I was in the cast of the Full Monty the Musical with him. I was.
Did I ever tell you how I got introduced to HTI?
I'm not sure, but let's have it out for the listeners. Why not?
A friend of mine was taking me out to lunch. We was going to go to, I think it's called Mulberry's over on James
Mulberry, yeah.
Yeah. So we're walking down McNabb, and I see this theater, and then it says All Shook Up. They were doing a production of All Shook Up, which
I was in that.
Okay, which my girlfriend at that time had done the original Broadway company of All Shook Up. So I said to my friend, I'm going to go in this theater and see what they're putting down. I just wanted to see. And so when I walked in the door, Ricky said, I don't believe it. It's Fred Owens. Just like that. And I was like, this is kind of scary. I'm new here in Hamilton, haven't even been here 2 weeks, and a woman knows who I am. She goes, no, I had directed Smokey Joe's Cafe. I know who you are. So I came into your rehearsal that day. That's how I was introduced to HTI. And so Ricky said, maybe one day you'll come here and do a show. And I just laughed it off because basically I didn't think that I was going to be doing theater anymore.
I now remember, yeah, it was during the run of All Shook Up that I first met you.
You guys were in a rehearsal.
Yeah.
And
my God, yeah, that's so cool.
Ricky brought me in to meet the cast. She said, you can't stay and watch the rehearsal, but I can introduce you to the cast. And so that's what happened. So, like I said, when I got ready to leave, she goes, well, here's my number. You have a card. Maybe you can do one of our productions. And like I said, I just laughed it off. And then she called me and asked me if I wanted to do Godspell. And I was like, really? She goes, Yeah, really. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, to be honest with you, because I left the industry because I didn't want to be on this big plane. And you have to understand what I mean. I walked away from it because I didn't like the attention. And I really didn't. I never liked the attention that being on the stage brought me. I didn't. And so in the States, as my players learned, they would always say when we would go to tournaments and coaches and officials would be coming over and asking for my autograph, they'd be like, "You a pretty big deal over here." And I went, "Now you know what I mean by I had to walk away from this because I can't just go nowhere and be me and just to live, just live and exist and be like everybody else." So when I did Godspell, the most beautiful thing in the world happened. Nobody cared who I was.
We cared, Fred. We all cared.
Nope, that's not what I got. And that's okay because that was what I wanted. I wanted to do theater. I wanted to continue to do Broadway, but it would have been impossible for me to do it because I got tired of every time you do a show and you come out of out the stage door, there are like 1,000 people and everybody wants a piece of you. Man, that stuff wears out. It gets old. Some people want that. They need that. And I never wanted it. So when people say, "Why would you walk away from fame and fortune?" And I say it was easy. I never asked for it. And I didn't. I never asked for either. So
Yeah. Godspell, that was a special show.
it was, yes, and yes, indeed it was. But the show for me was the Full Monty. That was the one. That was the one.
Yeah,
So
man,
if anybody says, "What is your favorite show that you've done on stage all time?" In as much as people may freak out when you say George Carlin, people freak out equally as much when I say the Full Monty I did in Hamilton. The best show I've ever done in my life.
I was the fucking lead of that show, and
Yes, you were.
I'm getting choked up now, man. You
Yes, you
consider
were.
that your favorite show?
Yes,
Dude,
you were. That
that is
show,
so cool.
that was the most perfect show that I have ever done. And when I say perfect, I mean from top to bottom. Whoever cast it, they laid the hammer down on this bad boy, Jack, because everybody was exactly where they're supposed to be. Everybody in that show was playing the role that they were just supposed to be playing, and that was it, because nothing else mattered. With these brothers that I'm on the stage with, we had such a chemistry. It was crazy. I didn't have that kind of chemistry with the brothers on when I did Smokey Joe's that I had with you guys. Obviously, we had a little bit more of a trust factor because we had to get naked on stage.
Yes, sir.
You feel me? So
Yeah.
so they set the whole thing up perfect. The stage manager was a woman, the director was a woman, the producer was a woman. They eliminated that whole thing of, we don't want no men in here because they're going to become nothing about, little pecker jokes and all this kind of stuff all day, and we ain't going to get nothing done.
That was my favorite. I mean, as much as I love that show for all the reasons you said, my favorite thing about it was that the entire production crew was women. And
yes, absolutely.
And you felt such a profound trust, and like you felt safe, and it just worked out so well. And shout out to our friend Monica who directed it. And
Monica and Matt Moore, whether they know it or not, I don't know if they hear your podcast. I'm not saying anything to stroke anybody's ego, because I've said it to them just like I say it to you. They're in my top 10 of the best directors I've ever worked with.
Matt and Humper are, I've talked to them about possibly coming on as guests on this podcast as well, because I've been a guest on theirs. And so, yeah, I mean, that's cool. I hope they listen. But
Matt Moore measures up with the great directors of Broadway that I've been around, the Howell Prince, Jerry Zaks, Susan Stroman, those three. Matt Moore is right in there with them.
He's a very insightful and smart guy.
And he's an incredible director. Of course, just like anybody else here, they, for whatever reason, they feel like because they're in Hamilton, it's not valid when you say things like that to these people. But he is. both Matt Moore and Monica in my top 10 in terms of directors that I've worked with. And I've worked with hundreds of directors, hundreds of them. And they gave me the liberty to not only create my character, they didn't have a problem if they wanted to bring more from, they knew exactly the buttons to press with me. And, you know, I need that because I'm not a trained artist. So I need that from the director because for me it's just something that I was gifted to do, but I really don't know how to do it. Thus, how I snuck on the train and never got caught.
Awesome. Before we sign off, I just want to talk about one more thing. I mean, you've had such a varied and interesting life and career. I don't want to sound reductive in any way, but
It's okay.
when I'm talking to people about you, and the go-to reference I make is, "Oh, he was in Hitch." You know that scene? Anyway, and like so. You appeared alongside Will Smith and Eva Mendes in the movie Hitch. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I remember the audition process of that. They originally wanted me to play the role of a chauffeur for the lady, not Eva Mendes, but the lady that Kevin James was so, you know,
right,
googly-eyed. I can't remember her name, but they wanted me to play a chauffeur for her. And we were in the room doing the reading, and Will just went, No. Y'all can't do this to this brother. Give him a role where y'all can hear his voice properly. That's
and you
how
were there.
yes, that's how I eventually got the role of Larry, because Larry had to do that tour of Ellis Island, and Will said it would be a great opportunity for, you know, us to showcase your voice. So that's how that happened.
All right, man. That's so cool. And again, I love when that movie comes on. It's an unexpected visit from me.
I still haven't seen it.
Yeah, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. We can enjoy it for you.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it, but that's only because I'm so critical of myself. I won't watch myself, and that's why I don't. So,
Anyway, Fred, look, I really appreciate you sitting down and talking to me. You know, I love you, brother, and
I love you too, my friend. You know it.
There you have it, folks. Podcast number 23, Broadway and Beyond, with Frederick Bruce Owens. I want to thank my guest again for sitting down and chatting with me. Ain't he something? Oh, we all love Brother Fred. A fascinating guy. Blast to talk to. Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. Check out our YouTube channel. Click subscribe for this, all past, present, and future episodes of the podcast. Reach out to us on social media. Got some cool episodes coming up. Gonna talk about Robin Williams, Lucille Ball, a whole bunch of stuff. Till next time, folks. We'll see you at the movies. And cut. Brennan?